Hello, I'm Katie Harrison and this is Stepmum Space, the judgment-free zone where we'll talk candidly about the fairy tales and scary tales of stepmum life. So whether you've been a stepmum for years, you're just starting out, or you want to understand the stepmum in your life a little bit better, this is the place for you. My guest today, Rose, is a full-time stepmum to a 13-year-old girl. Rose met her husband 6 years ago and was initially an every other weekend stepmum, but things changed fast when her stepdaughter came to live with them full-time. Rose got in touch with me to share her story. So Rose, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. So tell us a little bit about your step story.
I met my husband about 6 years ago. He obviously told me straight away that he had a daughter. At that time, she didn't live with him. She lived with her mum and he saw her every other weekend for the whole weekend. We took a little while for me to meet her, about 6 months before I met her. And then we did the sort of part-time thing for a while. After we were together for a couple of years, my stepdaughter had to come and live with my husband. And at that point, we weren't living together yet. So yeah, she came to live with him. Very soon after that, about 3 months after that, I also came to live with them both. And now we all live together and we have done for 3 years.
So you've gone from kind of no children to permanent child.
Very quickly.
Tell us a little bit about how it was in the early days, sort of meeting her and doing the every other weekend stepmom gig.
When I first met my husband, he told me that he had a child and I work with children. So I very arrogantly said, that's fine, I'm used to children, that'll be no problem. Not really understanding what it would feel like.
I don't think you're the only one who's been there and made that assumption.
Yeah. Obviously, we weren't living together at that point and she wasn't living here. So her time with him was also very special to both of them. So I was there maybe sort of one day every weekend that she was here. There was a lot of, I don't know if jealousy is the right word. No, it is the right word. It was sort of, it's difficult. I'm sure everyone that listens to this podcast that is a stepmom knows those feelings, especially initially, because we'd been together for 6 months before that. So I'd had him sort of to myself whenever we were together. It was just us until I was introduced to her. And then suddenly sort of seeing him as a dad and that she was always going to come first was quite difficult.
Yeah, I think it's really brave of you to admit that you felt that jealousy. How did that manifest itself?
I don't know, really. It's just a really hard feeling of having to share the person that you want to yourself the most. And it almost doesn't matter whether it's a child or anything else. It's just having to share their attention and their love and then realizing that you are never, ever going to come first and having to accept that is really difficult. I know that obviously you've talked about this on the podcast before, but there was a lot of Disney dadding going on where he was hugely overcompensating for everything. And then I was overcompensating as well because I wanted her to like me and be happy. So it's all a real tangle of emotions, I would say, that first initial bit. There was quite often when I thought, I don't know if I can do this, to be honest, but obviously when you fall in love with somebody you can't really help that. So it's sort of, I want to be with him, so I'm going to have to get used to it. So yeah, from my side, obviously I didn't show her that I was jealous, but I probably expressed to my now husband that that's how it felt, but not always maybe in the right way.
And how did he take that?
He's very good at listening and acting on other people's emotions, so I'm quite lucky in that way. But obviously, especially because at that point she didn't live here and there was a lot of, like I said, the overcompensating happening, he was very quick to kind of jump in and say, well, you're kind of just going to have to deal with it a little bit. He was supportive, obviously, but at the same time, he was in a difficult position as well because he wanted to put her first, and rightly as well. It wasn't always easy.
And how did she take to you? Was there any difficulties on that side?
I don't think so. I mean, the first time I ever met her, we always tease her about it now because obviously now she's 13 and then she was 7. But the first time I met her, we went for dinner and I remember being really nervous. And then on the way home, she held my hand and she went, I really like you, in a really goofy way, which is nice. But obviously that was kind of before she realised I was going to be here permanently.
We hear that a lot. The children really like the kind of stepmom when they think it's just dad's friend, and then as it all sort of settles down and they think, hang on a minute, she's here to stay, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I think she, again, obviously because of the Disney dadding vibe and me massively trying too hard, she obviously thought that when she was here with us, everything was so great and that's how it was all the time, even when she went home, which isn't true. Yeah, then she got used to me being around, but then had to share her dad, and she didn't get to see him very often. I do really understand that she felt threatened by me being there. There was a lot of the sort of questions of who do you love more, me or Rose? And again, things that I'll say to her now, do you remember when you used to do that? And she doesn't really remember, she used to push me out of the way when we were walking along the pavement and things like that. So there were, those difficulties, which I'm sure everybody's experienced.
That's tricky though. How did he answer that? Who do you love the most?
This is one time that obviously I already loved him, but it really kind of told me that I love him so much, is that he just said, you can't compare it. It's a completely different type of love. I love you both. Even though I'm sure in his heart, he probably did love her more because she's her child. I don't know. But yeah, he didn't ever say to her that I know of course I love you more. He always just said, I can't answer that. Imagine me asking who you love more, me or mum.
Yeah.
So he handled that really well.
Yeah. So it sounds like there was a bit of competitiveness there from her in the early days.
Definitely. I mean, she was very little. And then obviously as our relationship went on, every time she came, I was there pretty much. Every weekend that she was there, I was here with them. So she didn't really get any time, but we made an effort for sort of daddy-daughter time to happen.
You talked about how you tried really hard in the beginning to sort of do everything right. Can you share a bit about that?
Yes. When I look back on it now, I honestly don't know how I had the energy, but I really was. I think it is a bit of a woman thing to be a perfectionist and want to be the best at things and do the best that you can. So just stuff like birthdays, making her ridiculous cakes, every event possible, making it a huge deal, spoiling her rotten pretty much, but really trying so hard that it was exhausting for everybody.
Do you think you were Disney stepmom?
Yeah.
In the way of trying so hard to not be the wicked stepmom that you went too far the other way, do you think?
Yeah, I really did. I mean, like, I remember one Easter doing her an Easter egg hunt based on Harry Potter cryptic clues, and it was just ridiculous. And of course, then she's going home thinking, God, everything there is really fun all the time. It wasn't sustainable. Yeah. And then I think then if I ever did find things hard, I probably switched quite quickly into finding things hard, which must have been quite confusing for her. Whereas one minute I was Disney stepmumming, as you're saying, and then the next minute crying in the bedroom. So
I think that's quite an interesting dynamic, actually, of how when you're a stepmom, you're constantly kind of operating at this heightened sense of either trying to do everything well or feeling like you've massively failed. Whereas with biological mothers, they tend to seem a little bit more comfortable going with the flow. And I know, I do both, and I certainly feel much more comfortable and less like I have to sort of try with my own children.
Yeah, I think I've said this to my husband before, that the thing I always say to him is that he's got DNA and unconditional love on his side. So, he can make mistakes and it will get forgiven so quickly, whereas it does get forgiven very quickly for me as well, but it feels like it's going to be a huge deal. Even now, after 6 years, I still feel like that. That if I ever make a little mistake, then I feel guilty for ages about it, whereas I think a biological parent would just go, oh, never mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hear that a lot as well. So as things were developing between you and your husband, you talked about how your stepdaughter came to live with her dad full time. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, her mum unfortunately has a lot of mental health needs and alcohol and drug dependency issues, which we weren't actually aware of quite how severe they were. It was quite a complicated situation. We knew that things weren't great. There was a bit of a build-up, but it was a very sudden, now she's here, find her a school. She lives with us now. And I wasn't living with them, but I was here a lot, and I ended up doing sort of most of the school runs and things like that. And obviously because of the trauma of what she'd been through, she was in a pretty bad way in terms of anxiety and stuff. So we had a very emotional, traumatic couple of months sort of getting her settled.
And how old was she when she came to live with her dad full time?
She was just 9.
So you've got a 9-year-old girl who's been sort of ostensibly taken away from living with her mother because it's not deemed safe for her. Did that change your relationship with her?
I think it probably fast-tracked things a little bit because obviously I'd been every other weekend stepmom, and then suddenly I was full-time stepmom doing the things that a parent does, and more than her dad in some ways, just because of logistics. I was able to do it more because of work and things. Those initial few months we both found really difficult. There was a lot more of the sort of who do you love more questions and things, but that just came from her massive anxiety of having to move and things. Getting into her having been here a bit longer, we've had ups and downs just like anybody. And as she sort of started feeling better from her anxiety and stuff, now we have a really great relationship. I'm really lucky, actually. I don't mother her, but I parent her. That's the kind of dialogue we use.
That's interesting. So what does that mean in real life terms? What sort of things do you do and what sort of things do you not do?
So I do a lot of the practical things just because I think that I'm the organizer, which I think, again, probably a lot of women, that comes down to them, especially when she first came. All sort of school communication and stuff was via me, things like that. The way that I've kind of described it before to my husband is I feel like our dynamic's slightly different in that he's more like the mum and I'm more like the dad, in that I'm a little bit more distant. That's a real generalization about mums and dads, by the way, but it kind of describes the point. So I am not super affectionate with her, probably as much as a biological parent would be. I don't tell her off as much. I do obviously occasionally have to make points to her, but not in the same way that a parent would. I would never ground her or anything like that. And there's some things I still would run by her dad before I agreed to them. So it's not got the same freedom as a biological parent, but I definitely do a lot of jobs that a parent would do.
And are you comfortable with that split between what you do and what you don't do?
I think that I've kind of made it that way. So I feel like I'm sort of trying to do that. But obviously because she lives here, I have to parent as well. We genuinely are really good friends. We get on really well. But I don't think that we have a really strong sort of maternal relationship. But I think that that's good for both of us because she's got a mum. However sort of difficult her mum is, she's still got one.
And does she see her mum now?
She sees her every 6 weeks or once a month, not very often.
That must be hard. It must be hard for her to not see her mum, but know that she's got a mum there. It's quite unusual. Most of the stories that we hear, the child spends more time with the mum or the mum's passed away.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting dynamic. And obviously that's why I really wanted to talk to you, is because I haven't heard of many step families where this is the dynamic. Usually it's either, like you said, the mum's passed away or the biological mum is still there very much in the picture. I think that my stepdaughter found it really hard initially, but wanted to be here because it had been so difficult there. Then went through a phase of, oh, mum seems like she's doing better. That was really difficult again because she was here and then maybe she was thinking that she wanted to be there. And now I honestly think that she's just so used to it, and she's old enough now that when she's there it's still fairly turbulent is the word I would use. So I think she's now old enough to sort of realise that this is her safe place, and she goes to see her mum, but that's not her home. I can't say exactly how she feels about it, and it must still be really hard for her, but she's very settled here, which is good.
I guess it's really helpful for you that she sees that and she's able to sort of see the situation for what it is and see what you and her dad bring to her life.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't ever want her to feel grateful, because I think that children that are settled in a home don't feel grateful for that. They just take it for granted, and she totally takes us for granted, and that makes me know that she's happy and settled.
So it's interesting, you talked earlier about how obviously she doesn't see her mother. Does her mother have any input at all into sort of what goes on in your home or her life? Or do you have any relationship with her mother?
So initially, when I met my husband, I, again, trying too hard Disney stepmumming, really wanted to try and have a relationship with her mum, because I knew that, you know, I was going to be having an impact on my stepdaughter's life. So I thought, right, let's try and make it work. But her mum is really not mentally stable. There's a lot of sort of issues that happen. So unfortunately, we don't have a relationship with her at all now. She's not able to contact us just because it protects us all. But she can email, which is the only contact that she can have, which is obviously difficult for my stepdaughter because she ends up sort of texting and arranging lifts and things, but it is actually better for all of us. In the sort of early days, her mum, when we did still have contact with her, her mum had an absolutely huge influence on everything, because she was constantly texting and ringing my husband about things that we'd done or hadn't done. Me especially, she found it really hard. I think that there was another woman in my stepdaughter's life. You know, we'd get text saying, tell Rose not to tell my daughter she loves her, which I hadn't done by that point, but you know, it was that sort of thing, and quite literally couldn't do anything right. If I was nice to her, that was wrong, and if I obviously would never be horrible to her, but if I had been, that would have been wrong as well. And even now, she's still sort of, even though we don't have contact with her, I still feel like her influence is there because she's my stepdaughter's mum, and I'm sure that she says a lot of stuff about us when she's with her.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes wonder whether it's even in the situation where the biological mother doesn't contact you and the child doesn't live there, it's interesting how much of a influence she still has on your daily life.
It is really enormous, and I really wish it wasn't. I was talking to somebody the other day about it, and they said, why does she have such an influence on you? Because I've only met her in person twice in 6 years. She literally doesn't live near us. It's not like she's really present, but it's just that she has an influence on my stepdaughter, and that impacts us. And if she's having a difficult time with her mental health, and it affects my stepdaughter, and that affects us. Or if she's not, it affects us, because then my stepdaughter's all giddy about her mum being okay and having a lovely time with her, and it's difficult. And it's difficult with the fact that I do, that is another thing that I've had to kind of get my head around, is the fact that I do a lot of the day-to-day stuff that her mum should be doing, and she's not doing it. And then when her mum is in her life, the very brief amount of time she is, then that's amazing for my stepdaughter, but then I feel like I just get sort of shoved aside. That sort of, you know, I do so much for her, but I'm never going to be in first place, which sounds so silly.
I don't think it feels silly at all. I think it's something a lot of women would be able to really empathise with, actually.
Yeah, a good example is this week that my stepdaughter's had her school drama production, and her mum came, and it's the first time in 4 years that her mum's come to anything since she's lived with her. And obviously it was quite a big deal for my stepdaughter, and I was really happy for her that she was there, but I was the one that did her hair before she went, and we'll be picking her up, and we'll be giving her money for her dinner, and it feels hard that's kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It just feels hard.
And I think that's okay. I think it's really important to acknowledge how you feel and to give yourself permission to feel that feeling. Because I always think half the problem that us stepmoms have is it's not like the feelings that we have, it's the feelings that we then have about those feelings. You know, how you feel, I think, is entirely normal, but then you're then feeling guilty for feeling like that and almost beating yourself up a bit.
Yeah, and I think there's always that sort of, oh, I'm the grown-up, I should just be able to deal with it.
But you're still a human. You're still a human.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
you still have emotions, and it's still okay. And I think, you know, we sort of bottle them up and expect ourselves to be, you know, robots who'll take whatever life throws at us, but, you know, not give ourselves permission to feel something deep down or react for fear that we'll be judged. And I think the situation you've described, a lot of people would have an awful lot of empathy with.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's hard. It kind of brings up another issue of that it's so lonely being a stepmom, especially a full-time one, because sort of I was 27 when I met my husband, and that's quite young to suddenly have a child in your life a lot of the time. And, you know, went from being childless with no friends that have children to suddenly having a child in their life to be responsible for. And obviously then I am very responsible for my stepdaughter, and my friends are only just sort of now starting to have children. And also you don't want to keep telling people it's so hard. It's, you know, you don't want to keep having to say it's just hard, and you feel like they want you to just get over it and be fine. And most of the time now it is so much easier than it was, but it is still hard sometimes. But there's not loads of people to talk to, and that's why I'm very pleased that you've done your podcast.
Yeah, it's a unifying feeling of loneliness, I think, across stepmums and that fear of being judged if you talk about anything that isn't less than positive.
Yeah, and it's the wicked stepmom thing again, isn't it? Of trying to, you just don't want people to see you as that.
Did you feel like it was harder to voice the things that you were finding hard because she had come from such a hard situation?
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. And I think that obviously initially it was easier to talk about how difficult it was. But then once she was here, it very much became, we need to help her feel better because this is not a good situation at the moment. And we put a lot of effort and work into her feeling settled, which then helped us because then we were all settled.
And how did your relationship with your partner change from when you were kind of, every other weekend, you obviously had lots of time to yourself, and then suddenly you had a stepdaughter who was there 24/7. And I guess at the time she was not old enough that she was out and about doing her own thing.
Yeah, I know that you will know how this feels, and so will lots of other people. When it's a part-time thing, that Sunday night feeling is good. I get my partner back to myself, and there's a lot of that feeling of, you still get the time together. But when it's a full-time thing, that first year I felt so desperate for time alone with my partner all the time. And because the time that she spent with her mum was never when it should have been, it was all over the place all the time, so we could never plan anything. But she didn't want to go anywhere at all other than here because she was so anxious because of everything that had happened to her. So that desperation of needing time alone was just so real, and he didn't feel that because obviously she's his daughter and he just wanted to look after her. I mean, I know that he would have wanted to spend time with me on my own, but not in the same desperate way that I did. Then as time's gone on and she's been here longer, I realised the other day I honestly don't feel like that very often at all, because she's just here and we're so used to it. She doesn't want to spend all her time with us at all now because she's 13, but it was getting that way anyway when she was sort of 11 and 12. So in that way, it's 100% easier than it used to be.
And did you ever feel resentful of having to share your partner?
Yeah, I think resentful is a word that describes the first half of our relationship. And I hate that because I feel so guilty for feeling like that again, feeling guilty again. But I was so resentful of him, mainly for bringing his ex into my life because she's a very difficult person who makes things very difficult. So there was huge resentfulness there of why did you even go out with her in the first place? And now I've got to deal with her forever because she's my stepdaughter's mum. And then obviously resentment of having to share my time with my partner who I loved, and then resentment of having to parent a child that's not mine when nobody else I knew was doing that. I found that really difficult. I don't feel that way anymore, which is good because it was very difficult to feel that way. But yeah, it was a big part of our lives.
And when you were in that situation, could you talk to your partner about it?
Yeah, I could. I think that I probably didn't realise how difficult it was for him, because in my head, he was so lucky that he had two people that love him the most and wanted to spend time with him, and he didn't have to try to get anyone to like him, which we were both probably, me and my stepdaughter were both probably trying to get each other to like each other. I felt like he was lucky, and I didn't realise that he was feeling really torn. And yeah, I used to sort of really try and understand, why would you have a baby with somebody that's so difficult? But obviously people are young and things change, and that's just life. So yeah, I could talk to him about it. I think he found it probably a little bit bewildering, and I probably was quite unfair with some of the stuff that I was saying.
I don't think you're the only stepmum to think, what were they thinking?
It's just such a horrible thing to think, though. And, we all do stupid things when we're in our early 20s. And like I said, people change and things happen. Now that I know him how I know him, it's really hard to get my head around it. But then can't fix that or do anything about it. That's that. So.
And do you think it's easier that you don't have to see her very often?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely feel, especially having read a lot and listened to your podcast, and I think that the presence of the biological mother is quite often the most difficult thing about a step-family relationship, and the fact that I don't have to deal with that very often at all, I think that it is actually a lot easier for us.
Yeah, it gives you freedom almost to build your own relationship with your stepdaughter in the way that works for the both of you without somebody else who might not want that relationship to be as positive getting involved.
Yeah, exactly. I think I kind of felt it in the early days when she was still very present. There's just texts about things that I'd done and said she wasn't happy with. She still tried to do it occasionally. My stepdaughter will mention something she's had for dinner and we'll get an email saying, don't feed my child that, and ridiculous things like that. But it's not nearly as much as somebody that has to split their stepchild's time with the biological mother at all. So even though our situation was difficult, I think that it's much easier for us in that we don't have that influence, and it means that I can have the influence that I want to have over my stepdaughter without anyone else sort of telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, which is incredibly liberating. And I think you're right. A lot of stress that stepmums feel does come from kind of the constant presence of somebody else. So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it's very difficult, I guess, for your stepdaughter to maybe not have her mum in her life. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe just make an assumption on that. But yeah, it's nice for you that you can sort of just get on with things as you wanted. So you've obviously learned a massive amount along the way. If you were starting the journey again, what would you tell yourself?
Be patient, which is the most difficult thing to be, but things will get better and they will get easier. Find a good counsellor is another one that you can talk to about these things. It's hard to find a counsellor that knows about step families, but you can find somebody nice that you can just talk to and they won't judge you. Don't try too hard because you'll just get tired and you won't be able to sustain it, and it's not a reflection of reality that somebody is that fun all of the time. But yeah, most of all, just look after yourself, because you can't look after anyone else if you are a puddle of mess on the floor of emotion. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, we always hear biological mums being told, you've got to fasten your own mask first. You can't take care of anyone else if you're not in a good place. And somehow the rule seems to be totally different for stepmums. And it's like, well, you knew what you were getting into, which obviously is the line that we all hate to hear. So obviously now your family is settled, seems really comfortable, things seem to be going well. Do you think about the future and how things might change with your stepdaughter's mum and the impact that might have on you guys?
I do, but to be honest, I don't think that she will ever go back to live there. And I think the older that she gets, the more that she'll realise what her mum's like. And that's really difficult, obviously, for a child to have to understand that your parent isn't a great parent. I think she'll always have her mum in her life, but I envision that we will be her main parents sort of forever. And I'm happy with that. And that's nice for all of us, having been through all the trauma and the turbulence. And now that everything's so much better and easier, I wouldn't change it.
That's so nice. It makes me so happy to hear you say that, because I think it's really important that we acknowledge how difficult and bumpy and challenging all those hard times are, and all the uncomfortable emotions that so many of us feel so much of the time, but that you get to a place where it's good, and you've worked really hard for that. So, I hope you feel really proud of where you've got to.
Yeah, I do feel proud, and I feel proud of all of us. I feel proud of myself for sort of putting in the work. I think there's a real sort of, I don't even know, some kind of special strength that women have and that stepmums have, because it's really bloody difficult putting in that much work and not getting that much out of it and being okay with that. So I think I'm proud of myself for that, and I'm mostly proud of my stepdaughter because she's awesome and she has come a long way and she's a great person to be around.
That's so good. Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing some of those sort of more complicated emotions that a lot of people don't talk about. I think there'll be a lot of people listening who will be thrilled to realise that they're not the only people who feel like that. So thank you so much for trusting me with your story.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me, and thank you for the podcast.
Wow, what an incredible woman. It's so lovely to hear a happy ending, but I'm especially grateful to Rose for sharing the truth about some of her feelings over the last 6 years and how she managed her way through them. If you're in the middle of turmoil, conflict and difficulties, I hope that gives you some comfort that things can get better. I loved what Rose said about stepmums having a certain type of strength, our stepmum superpower. So sending loads of love to anyone who's having a tough time at the moment. And she also talked about finding support and somewhere to talk. So we've got a couple of spaces left on our upcoming Stepmum Space meetup and workshop day. It's a one-day virtual workshop on either the 7th or 8th of April 2022, which has been professionally designed for women going through the challenges of being a stepmum. On the day, you'll be able to meet others on the same roller coaster and receive professional coaching to help with the unique issues that you are facing in your step life. Get yourself to www.stepmumspace.com/workshops to find out more and sign up. And we've got a 10% off discount for the 7th of April session with the code STEPMUM10. So that's all from me. Thanks for listening. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do spread the word, give us a rating or review so other stepmums can find us. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.